If I could introduce you to Jesus Christ in the flesh, you could literally reach out and shake the hand of Jesus, gaze into his eyes, listen to his voice with your own ears. Would you be a stronger Christian? Would you be a better Catholic if you could meet Jesus face to face? I can do that. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells a story about a king. Of course, he's talking about himself. And the story goes, there was this king who gathered all his people together. Once everyone was assembled, the king stood up, and this is what he said. I was hungry, thirsty, naked, homeless, and sick, and you passed me by. The people looked at their king and screamed, when? When did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or naked, or homeless, or sick? And the king said, whatever you have done to the least amongst you, that's what you've done to me. So it's clear that when you or I reach out and we touch the least amongst us, we get to touch God himself. Food for the Poor was established in 1982 by a Catholic layperson. The guy wasn't even a priest. Go figure. That's probably why we've been so successful in our 32-year history. Last year, we were named the largest international charity in America. Our exclusive focus is a third world poverty in America's backyard. Sadly, you don't have to go far to find authentic third world poverty, to find authentic third world suffering. They're our neighbors. In the 17 countries that we serve throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. One of our countries, the country of Haiti, last year got a new title. Haiti has now been deemed the poorest country in the entire world. And it's just on the other side of Cuba. It's an hour and 17-minute flight from Miami International Airport. Now, I know a lot of people come and beg. Why would you want to choose Food for the Poor to be your outreach to touch the least amongst us, your outreach to touch God himself? The hallmark of Food for the Poor is something most charities never talk about. Sadly, most charities hide it. I'm talking about overhead expenses. Charities doing our kinds of ministry begin with a respectable low of just under 10%. But most of them go as high as 30, 60, and 90% administrative costs. I'm proud to tell you that at the close of our books last year, Food for the Poor continues to have the lowest overhead of any charity in America. We're currently at under 3.6%. So I can honestly tell you that most of your gift truly winds up in the hands of the poor, in the hands of God. Now, having said that, let me tell you, there is no special collection at this Mass for Food for the Poor. Admit it. Now you're wondering if I'm really a priest. In place of that, in the pews, at the ends of the pews, you're going to find this very colorful brochure. I'm going to ask the people sitting at the ends of the pews, you're probably sitting on them, to pick them up and pass them down. Everybody hold a brochure. Now this is important. When Mass is over, I want to see you walking out of church holding a brochure. If you don't have one of these, it's going to get real ugly real fast. When you get it home, open it up. The first side will tell you all about food for the poor. You turn that over, you're going to see that little becomes much in the hands of God, and these pages bear that out. Let me give you a couple of examples. A gift of $205, you can put a water pump in a village. Doesn't sound like a big deal until you realize most people in the third world have to walk over 30 miles round trip every day for water that will not harm them, water that will not kill them. That job's given to the children. It's an all-day task, so the children are unable to attend the local schools. And education is the only thing that's going to break the cycle of poverty. A gift of $205, not only are you bringing life-sustaining water into the village, you're allowing the children to attend school and change their lives. A gift of $90, you can give a goat to a family, which will give the children ongoing nourishment through the production of its milk. It's funny, every year around Mother's Day, we get thousands of phone calls from our male donors all across America wanting to purchase a goat in honor of their mother-in-law. That's true. $24 doesn't go far here. Give it to us, and you'll be feeding 400 children for a day. The next thing I want you to find is this yellow strip, because this is where you're eventually going to tear the brochure. If you tear it right, and God's going to be watching you, this becomes a mailing envelope. You can stuff a huge check in here. This paper is tough. It's been tested by nuns. Write your name and address down on these lines. Now, if you want to use your credit card, no problem. Just fill out the credit card information. Then all you gotta do is lick the yellow strip. Here we go. Delicious. Close it, it'll seal itself and put it in the mail. It's pre-addressed, has one of these postage paid stamps. Okay, Mass is over. You're walking out of church, you got your brochure, you wave it in my face so you get safely to your car. You walk in the kitchen, you take the brochure, and you put it on top of the refrigerator to get to it later. And it's gonna die a long, slow death up there. You have cash, a check, or your credit card this morning, and you want to give now and save us the cost of this bulk postage. This does get expensive. I would invite you to put your gift in the envelope, fill it out, seal it, and you can hand it to me as you leave church this morning, and I will have it in the office tomorrow afternoon. I'll be right in the front of church after Mass. If you don't want to see me after Mass, use these emergency exits to get to your car. And if you wanted to use your credit card but you left it at home, no problem. Borrow someone else's. The best way to tell you about the ministry is to give you a personal story. My title at the ministry, I'm the leader of our pilgrimage department. We invite all of our American donors to come with me for 5 days down to one of the 17 countries that we serve, where I'm going to personally introduce you to the poor. And remember, when you meet the poor, you're going to meet your God. I was on the road and my cell phone went off. It's Nancy in the office. She said, "Father, we got a problem." I said, "Nancy, what's the problem?" She said, "We have a donor out in the Midwest. He wants to come on a trip, but he wants to bring his 11-year-old daughter with him. We never had anybody that young. What do you think?" I said, "Nancy, Not only do we see poverty, we see human suffering. I think 11 might be a little bit too young. She said, "No problem, Father, I'll take care of it. But Father, for your information, the donor gives us $50,000 every year." I said, "Nancy, will they need 1 room or 2 rooms?" We were off to Jamaica, had 19 adults and the little girl. Our plane landed in Kingston. We walked out. There's my big blue and white bus and my driver, Mr. Bailey. We began our journey to the poor. Our first stop was a place called Poor Relief, an overnight homeless shelter in downtown Kingston. We got there early enough to assist in the morning feeding. I watched the little girl. She jumped off the bus, walked over, picked up a tray, put 6 bowls of rice and beans on it, and took it over to the poor. But as she put the food down in front of each person, she introduced herself and told them how happy she was to be in their country and to meet them. And I thought to myself, maybe everything's going to work out all right. We climbed on the bus and we drove out to the Golden Age home. This is an interesting place. This place has 7 different buildings, reflecting all the different reasons people become abandoned and forgotten. The first building had 50 severely challenged, abandoned children. Most of the children were laying on the ground in the dirt. We got off the bus, we walked in. I looked at our little girl. When she saw the kids on the ground, she froze. But after about 60 seconds, she warmed up to the sight, walked in and started to meet the children. We walked down the street to the home for abandoned elderly. She was a big hit there. She walked away with 50 brand new grandmothers and grandfathers. We climbed on the bus, made several more stops, and then we came to St. Monica's home for people with leprosy. And I got to introduce our little girl to Mr. George McPhee. George has since passed on. George, in the early days of his leprosy over 50 years ago, lost all of his fingers on his left hand. On his right hand, all he had left were the middle 3. The little girl looked at his face, leaned over to me and said, "Father, what's wrong with his eyes?" They were all glassed over. I leaned down and I said, "Darling, George is blind. He can't see you." She reached out for his 3 fingers, slowly dragging them across her face, looked up at me and said, "Father, George can see me now." George was so moved. He recited his favorite poem to the little girl, a poem entitled, "I'm drinking from the saucer because my cup has overflowed." Getting on the bus, the little girl turned to me and said, "Father, I really enjoyed meeting George, but what's a saucer?" We continued down the road, made several more stops. Then we came to the last stop of the first day. But honestly, it's the toughest stop of the week in Jamaica. A place called My Father's House, started by Father Gregory. Father Gregory takes in the children nobody else wants. These children require care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These children are difficult to look at. I don't know if you've ever seen a child born and left untreated who is hydrocephalic, water on the brain. They develop enormous heads. Their bodies are tiny. Their arms and their legs, they're as thin as my finger. And they're all twisted up in horrible shapes. No matter how much I try and warn the donors about what they're going to see, everybody freezes. And it takes several minutes to gather up the strength and the courage to go in and meet these children. We pulled up, we got off the bus, we walked in. I looked at the group, and everybody froze. All but one, the 11-year-old girl. She walked around all the adults up to a child seated in a wheelchair. The child's body was all slumped over. The weight of her head was pulling her down. Our little girl knelt down in front of the wheelchair, opened up her arms, leaned forward and embraced the child. She then opened up her pocketbook and she pulled out a little jar of red nail polish, and she proceeded to paint the fingernails and the toenails of the hydrocephalic child. We got back to the retreat center. We had dinner and evening prayer, and every night I have a short reflection. We sit in a circle. I go around the room, and I ask everybody the same two-part question. So if you're thinking about coming on one of these trips, and I sincerely wish you would, this is the question I'm going to ask you each night. What was the highlight of your day, and did you see Jesus there? We went around the room. The last one to speak was a little girl seated at my left. I leaned over and I said, "Darling, if you want to share with the group, what was the highlight of your day, and did you see Jesus there?" She took this huge sigh and fell back into the chair. She looked me straight in the face and she said, "Father, I've been waiting for this moment all my life. When my daddy told me I'd be coming on this trip and I would meet the poorest of the poor, in my heart, I knew I was going to meet Jesus. But Father, I never thought I'd wind up painting his fingernails and his toenails." And I knew she got it. As this young girl grows up, becomes a young woman, eventually a mature adult, if there's ever a moment in her life where she needs to feel the power, the security, the warmth, the love of Jesus, all she's got to do now is close her eyes and go back to my Father's house and recall that moment when she knelt before her Lord and painted his fingernails and his toenails, and everything's going to be all right.